I believe we are live, folks. I'd like to once again thank everybody for joining us for another session of Black Philanthropy Month's Lunch and Learn series. This is session 2. We are back with the topic of nonprofit finances. What do they say? Backed by popular demand. Before we get into the topic, I just really want to stress how important that Black Funders of St. Louis believes this topic is. You know, I was reading an article this morning that said that as a result of COVID-19, they anticipate more than 30% of nonprofits will have to shutter their doors. I think the concept of fiscal health and financial stability is really the foundation to making sure that isn't our collective reality, right? Making sure that as many of us can avoid that situation as possible. For those who aren't familiar with Black Funders of St. Louis, we're a Black-led giving circle. We were founded in 2016. We became operational in 2017. If you're unfamiliar with the concept of the giving circle, essentially we're a group of Black people that live here in the St. Louis region that agree to contribute $300 or more annually. That money is pooled together with donations from non-members and what I call allies of racial equity, non-Black people. And we award grants to nonprofits here in St. Louis that we believe are making a difference. Our work is firmly rooted in the concept of racial equity and a fairer St. Louis. And in addition to making grants, we encourage our members to do like what we're doing today, which is to offer their time and their talents to support the greater St. Louis community, Black people, and Black-led nonprofits. So the work is important. If you're unfamiliar with giving circles, Black Funders of St. Louis, or this is your first webinar with us, you can go to our website, blackfundersstl.com, and you can learn more about all of that. In addition, before we get started, I want to acknowledge our fiscal sponsor, which is offering technical support on today's call. That's Deaconess Foundation. Thank you, Deaconess Foundation. And just housekeeping stuff as we get started. You'll notice there's limited use of the chat box, but there is a Q&A box. In a minute after the presenter comes on, the Q&A box will be open and live. You can ask questions to us. I'll monitor those questions while the presenter is talking. We'll try to make a little time at the end for Q&A, but mostly we'll be looking for opportunities to actually use your Q&A as we're talking, right? So the presenter, she's fantastic. Her name is Kim Stemley. She's the former Executive Vice President and CFO of RX Outreach, which is a nonprofit pharmacy which spun off from Express Scripts, which is now known as Cigna, in 2010 to provide low-cost and no-cost prescriptions to low-income and underinsured Americans. During her tenure, RX Outreach helped patients save more than $661 million on their prescription medications and served more than 285,000 patients across the United States. Kim currently serves as the chair of the Community Advisory Council and is the former ex officio board member of the Missouri Foundation for Health, one of the nation's largest public health foundations of its kind. In 2015, Kim was invited to speak to the Senate Special Committee on Aging to advocate for funding to support Alzheimer's research and treatment. And finally, Kim has previously worked for Ernst & Young, AT&T, and the engineering firm Innovator. With that, I am happy and excited to have Kim back. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Brandon. I don't know if I can be seen. Can you see me? Okay. Thanks, Brandon, for your generous introduction. I know you said you were going to do a 1 or 2 sentence introduction, but that was great. So thank you so much. And I can see you, Brandon. I don't know if I'm streaming or can they see me or can they still see you? Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead. And again, this is our first. I think he said our second or third in the month for Black funders for our monthly presentations, and I'm excited that Black funders has had me back again to speak to everyone about really surviving the economic downturn. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been briefing a few sessions before, but I do want to dig deeper into some of the concepts that we probably haven't had enough time to kind of dig into previously. Again, excited to be here. I know and in preparation and for this particular presentation today, I was just thinking, wow, we've been through a lot this year, right? So this year has been definitely one for the history books. I would say definitely one for our personal history books. I thoroughly believe this year will stand out in all of our lives for many reasons and many significant changes that have taken place in our personal lives and our business lives, and even in our cases, the life of the clients that we serve. And so I start asking myself these questions, you know, what is 2020 going to say about our existing programming, right? What is it going to say, and what stories are going to be told from the clients that we serve? What new concepts and service areas are going to pop up from 2020 just because we had to get innovative, right? Because we were forced out of our comfort zones. And so we created something new. We created and began servicing a population of people that maybe we had overlooked before, or maybe we just hadn't circled that direction yet. And so I'm looking to see those type of stories come out of this year. I'm looking to see what kind of stories come from our staff. You know, what will our staff remember? What will they remember about 2020? The people that we work with day in and day out. What will their stories be as we come out of this year? And so with those thought processes, my hope for all of that is we still have time to make those great stories, right? So no matter where we are in that spectrum, no matter where you find yourself in some of those questions that I just asked, you know, asking some of those questions may have given some of you anxiety, you know, in your stomach, like, oh my God, you know, I don't know what stories I'm going to tell. You may know some existing things that you're struggling with today, that those questions kind of stirred up some things. But hopefully to give you hope today, we still have time. You know, it's literally the beginning of August, and there is still ample amount of time to begin to turn those stories around and to make them great stories, and where we're already doing good, to make them phenomenal stories. And so as we go into this presentation today, I'm going to kind of give us a preview of how we're going to get through this. There are slides. I actually have a slide presentation today, so I'm going to bring that up. Most of the time you'll see the slides and you'll hear me talking over the slides. But I do, as Brandon said, want to constantly check for your questions in this Q&A. So as I see questions popping up, and as Brandon sees them popping up as well, please feel free to just ask questions or share your thoughts throughout this entire presentation. I'll stop as I see those developing and respond to the questions. And so I want this to be as interactive as we possibly can make this. And so, yeah, let's jump into it. So the topic for today, I'm going to pull this up on my screen, and we are going to know and hope and pray that I'm doing this correctly. Okay, so I believe everyone can see my screen at this point, and I'm gonna keep going because I don't have any indication from Brandon that you can't see my screen. So I'm just assuming that I'm all good. So today we're gonna talk about surviving the economic downturn, nonprofit finances. And right off the bat, I do wanna take a little time. You can see this first slide says past and present, right? Or past and future. And it's kind of got this crossroads concept behind it. you know, we're already in August, so past literally could be the last 8 months or 7 months that we've already incurred in this year. Past for you could be the last 2 years or last day in some cases. And future, literally what we're speaking to today is not just the remaining of this year, but the future for the next life cycle of your nonprofit's journey. What is it going to look like at 12/31/20, but what is it going to look like at 12/31/21? What is it going to look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And so some of the things that we're experiencing right now and some of the work and the modeling that we're going to do today is going to help you to be able to answer those questions. Again, Brandon did a phenomenal job of introducing who I am. My name is Kim Stemley. Again, happy to be with you all and happy to be with Black Funders of St. Louis again. And so this just lays out a roadmap of where we're going, what we're going to talk about today. Right off the bat, I do want to spend some time talking about improving the financial discipline of your organization. And what does that look like? What themes are popping up now? Why is this such an urgency to improve financial discipline now? There's some obvious reasons, but there's some reasons that are not so obvious. And then we're going to address scenario planning. And we're actually going to take a little bit of time and build out what we just learned in scenario planning and building a financial model based on those scenarios. And then I do want to end up with some best practices, some concepts that I believe we all need to be aware of. And if we're not practicing them, we need to put them in place like today. And then again, this Q&A is on the end tail of the agenda, but I'm going to try to run it through the entire time. So why do nonprofits need to improve their financial discipline? Right off the gate, you know, recent events have exposed the need for improved financial disciplines, right? That allow for two things: real-time management and rapid decisions in an increasingly unpredictable future. Those two that are highlighted there in blue, if we get nothing else out of this presentation today, those are the two spaces that I want you to be good at, be better at. And that's being better at having real-time management and better at having rapid decision-making process. And, you know, I know I have been of the training that you want to take kind of a slow and methodical approach to making decisions. And we just don't have that. That's not the environment, unfortunately, that we are living in. You know, I think many of us, if not all, are from St. Louis. And, you know, what was that, 2.5 weeks ago, we were told the schools had 3 tiers, and they rolled out a plan for how our children were going to go back to school. And then literally a week later, it completely changed, right? And leveled the playing field for those that had already adopted a system. And now, nope, everyone's doing virtual. And so that was a rapid change, which caused rapid impacts to all of us, not just our children, but our economy. Your nonprofits are probably impacted by that decision. And so I use that as an example to say, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? We don't know what's going to happen next week that will literally have a major impact upon your organization. And with changes like that taking place, you need to be able to adapt quickly. You need to already have systems in place internally to respond to those internal, and many of those are external drivers that are impacting you, that are causing you to make decisions really quick. And literally quick means I don't have a month to sort through this. I may not have a week to sort through this. I literally may have a day. And so with that being said, I do want to also stress the importance of building a team of trusted individuals that can help you make these decisions in difficult times. That is going to be absolutely critical for everything that we're about to do today. This is going to be a model of how to do it, but that team of trusted individuals that you pull together, I would say that's going to be your HR, that's your finance, that's your program directors, that's your operations. IT individuals, your board of directors, if you have access to legal, be able to pull in some legal expertise from time to time. Those individuals that you value as your circle of influencers that work with you, they're going to be critical to making sure that everything we talk about today are going to improve the outcomes of your nonprofit. So new problems. We kind of know what they are, but they are unique. And so we're in increased marketplace volatility, which creates an inability to predict the future. Annual planning and forecasting processes, it's too inflexible to enable effective decision making. So what that means is for those individuals that have been doing a great job, every year you do an annual budget. Every year you do cash forecasting, and you do cash forecasting on a monthly basis, a weekly basis. You're good at doing budgets for your programs and budgets for your departments. You're great at that. And you do that kind of on an annual basis, and you may periodically review it and update it at some point. And most of the time you don't, right? But even that process is actually ineffective for the environment that we're living in. Internal and external risks are not built into that model. And so that's one of the reasons that process that you did in 2019, that budget you did in 2019 is probably blown out the water. I've looked at several budgets already this year of major organizations that have had to revamp their budgets because they just don't make sense at this point, right? You need to be able to easily understand your cash needs. And right now, there's some difficulties just in the environment that we are and the fast pace of the environment changing that makes that it makes it harder to understand simple things like, hey, what cash balance do I have? How much cash do I actually have? You know, and so sometimes it seems like a simple question, but it's not as simple in this type of environment. But we'll look at it. And then there's a lack of structured process. There's a lack for a structured process of a long-term financial outlook. And that's getting to that 2021-22 outlook. Are the things that I'm doing today, are they positioning me to be in a good place in a couple of years from now? So that means if those are the new problems, these are the new solutions, okay? We need to have the ability to manage multiple views of the future. We need to be able to look into the future, not with one lens or one focus area, but with many, because we just don't know what to expect, right? We need to incorporate a future focused on a view across multiple time horizons. And so when I look into the future, again, I keep using those dates, but I can't look into the future and stop at 12/31/20. I need to look into it and stop and do a view. What am I going to look like at 6/30/21? What am I going to look like at 3/30/21? You know, so I want us to be able to set up a viewpoint that allows us to stop at various time frames and imagine what that date is going to look like today. We need to, again, allow for agile management decision-making. All of this only works if we can make decisions very quickly. And a lot of our organizations are just, to be honest, not structured to do that, but we need to shift to be able to do that. And then focus on maximizing the long-term success of the business across diverse opportunities. So this is the first time we're using this word opportunities. And I want to say that, I hope I say it a few times throughout today, because there's opportunities in the midst of this pandemic and the things that we're dealing with. And they could be something that at the end of this process, or at the end of this pandemic, you end up actually being better for it. So this has me switching. I'm gonna switch my screen. I'm gonna stop my share a little bit, and then I'm gonna switch my screen to pull up. Okay. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. And this is actually a slide from Deloitte and Touche, actually. The reason I wanted to pull up Deloitte and Touche's slide, because I think it's just a perfect picture of how COVID-19 has impacted all of us. And I know today we are speaking directly to the nonprofit sector, but I want the nonprofit sector to also understand that you are part of a bigger group of individuals that are struggling with the exact same things. And so we're all in here together, regardless of what industry you're operating in within the nonprofit sector, regardless of where your role may be within your organization. Literally, this is spanning, the impact of the pandemic is spanning across every industry, tall and wide, right? And so one of the key points from this particular slide is saying that there's two critical uncertainties driving the overall impact of COVID-19. The severity of the impact on one end, this particular slide I think was done back in, I think they did this in May timeframe. And so some of these things that the slide is speaking to weren't exactly known. But I think, you know, as all of us I'm gonna kind of walk us through it as we talk through this slide. I think we all are knowing that we may know a little bit more of where we stand today. So on the low side here, on the low impact of the severity of the pandemic, it's got that there's a rapid peak, right? We have a quick peak in the spike of cases and the spike of the impact to our economy and our nation, and then it kind of dwindles back down. On the higher end, you can see it's all over the place. It goes up, it comes down. There's a second act is what it's calling. There's some roller coaster. The step right underneath that is that it kind of roller coasters. It goes up and down, which means we're not quite done with it yet. That's the higher impact. I would personally say we're probably along this roller coaster space right now. I think we've kind of been up. You can see in our state of Missouri, we were doing great about a month and a half ago, and now the impact in our state is shooting right back up. We're kind of like on a watch list within the nation, right? And then the number two is, what is the level of collaboration within and between countries? And so these are the best industry leaders in our nation, really. This is what they're using to assess the severity of the pandemic. And what they're saying is how you kind of know the severity of it depending upon how well we collaborate with others. And on the significant end, we have significant collaboration. That means we're doing great. We have a coordinated response, and we're probably going to come out of this thing pretty quick. On the marginal side, it means we're weak and we're divided. We have divided leadership or divided rules and divided response efforts. And unfortunately, I think in our state and kind of in our nation, we definitely have a divided approach to overcoming this pandemic. And so what that means, and I wanted to bring this up, is to say these are the thought processes that organizations and corporations are using to determine how long is COVID-19 possibly going to affect my organization, to affect my business, to affect my clients, to affect my revenue, right? And so as we go through this modeling, this lets you know right now in our nation, we're probably still very much so being severely impacted by the pandemic, and we need to plan and respond accordingly. Other key uncertainties, the healthcare system and the response to that, the economic consequences of the crisis, of course, and then social cohesion being a response issue with the pandemic. All of these drive whether or not we are coming out soon or not. And I'm going to, again, switch us back to the screen that I had before. Okay, so with that being said, and I wanted to take some time to talk just specifically about COVID-19 because I know you guys always want to talk about it, right? That's what we talk about every day. We talk about it at our homes, in our families. We literally talk about COVID-19 all day. So I do want to talk about it, and I wanted to get that out the door up front and personal, because everything that we're talking about and why we're even here today is because of COVID-19. And so we are reviewing our financial models because of this pandemic. And we've been now in this pandemic from, I guess, March of this year. And there are certain cycles that we should be processing through. And you can see this particular slide has the COVID-19 pandemic kind of in the middle there. And then the cycle of us getting through this is around that. We've got to respond, we've got to recover, and then we've got to thrive through this thing. And so responding to it has, this response phase has a couple of behaviors inside of response. It's a near-term action. It's, hey, do I have enough liquidity for the next month? Do I have enough capital and working cash? What's my cash flow looking like? Do I have enough, in some cases, to pay payroll for the next 3 months? What does this look like? Do I need to have capital expenditure reductions? Do I need to refocus some of those capital expenditures? We can't focus here. We need to put some of those efforts and assets over here. And so with that being said, that's when you're kind of in a response. You're just literally responding to the impact that COVID-19 has literally hit your organization and your client base, really. And then at some point when we kind of get stabilized there, we should be shifting to what we call recover. And recover is that midterm section, that midterm space where, okay, I can breathe a little bit. I know what my cash looks like. It may not be great. It may not be terrible, but I know what it is. And now I need to start planning. I need to do some scenario planning and some driver-based forecasting to identify what's life gonna look like for me in the mid to long-term future. And then after we understand that and actually start executing that, we need to start planning to thrive, right? What's our longer term plan? Once I make it through COVID-19, because our thought process should be to make it through it. I always say, if your mindset before we even start is I'm gonna fail, you're gonna fail. So if we go into this that, hey, I'm going to survive this, I just don't know how yet, then great. We're gonna get through how we figure the answers out. But we've got to get into a mindset that I am going to thrive and I'm going to make it to a long-term viewpoint. That is going to require some reimagining of the business into its new next normal. Business today won't look the same, or business tomorrow won't look the same as it looks today. And so some of those thoughts that you guys are having, I know you're getting innovative right now. I know your creativity is churning up inside of you. I know you figured out ways to do business and ways to service your clients that you had never thought about. And so, hey, wow, is that my new next thing? I need you to start developing that into an actual plan to develop opportunities and options now and implement dynamic portfolio and targeting. So in the slide before where we talked about midterm, that midterm space, it pulled out the terminology of scenario planning. And that's where I kind of want to hang out a little bit today, because there's a lot that we can cover, but we don't have a lot of time. So I want to spend some time talking about scenario planning, because that's the space that's actually going to help you do a couple of things. It can help even if you're in the near term and you're still trying to figure out if I have enough cash flow. That scenario planning is going to actually help you in that space. But even if you're not in that space and you're saying, hey, I kind of know that game, I know where we are in terms of how much actual money I have, how much actual liquidity I have, then at this point, scenario planning will help you in that midterm to shift you forward to being able to be in a thriving space. So either way it goes, we got to get to scenario planning, right? So what are scenarios? Scenarios are stories. They're stories about what the future may look like. What is it going to look like? Again, I keep using the 12/31, the 6/30/21, and the like. But what is life going to look like for my nonprofit, for the clients I serve at these different points in time? There are hypotheses about what could happen, designed to shed light on new opportunities or hidden risks. And so this process deals with explore, spot, and identify. We need to explore how trends could shape the world in the long term. We need to spot emerging needs and issues that conventional modeling could actually miss. That's going back to this concept that even if you are the individual that has great forecasting tools, you've been doing your budgeting every year and you're just a superstar at it, great. The problem, even with that, and I love budgeting and I love the budgeting process. I think it's, believe it or not, but I may be weird like that, one of the most exciting times of the year to start the budgeting process. But that's still not going to be effective in this market because you've got these external unknown factors that never are built into those type of financial models. And so we're going to go through a process of how do you do that? And then identify. Let's identify some actions to improve and in a rapidly changing landscape. Okay. Before we get to this next phase, I feel like I've been talking a little bit or a lot of it. So I can't see you. So I'm going to actually stop my sharing for a quick second. And I want to see if there's any, I'm going to come out of here and see if there's any questions. And if I don't have any, I'm going to pop back in. Okay, so there's no questions yet, which sounds good. So I'm going to, thanks Brandon. I'm going to get us back into the presentation. But as I promised, I was going to make sure that I stopped for questions, so I did. So we just talked about those scenarios. And again, scenarios are stories about what the future may look like. And what I want us to stop and do is take the time to do and learn a process today to help us understand how to get those scenarios built into our financial models. And so in this particular slide, you can see there's change drivers, there's the internal impact of those drivers, and then there's the financial impact of those drivers, right? And so it all kind of like trickles forward. And what we're going to do, like this is just a general ideas or general concepts, but these are true. These are real to life scenarios, actually, or real to life drivers that are happening today. And these may be impacting your specific nonprofit or not. But what I want to show you is the process of how to take these drivers and move them forward. So right off the bat, I've got, 5 drivers in here. Driver number 1, COVID-19 infection rates increase. I think in some cases, depending on where you live, unfortunately, we are seeing that happen. All local school districts cancel in-person school. Again, if you live in St. Louis, you're seeing that happen. Major corporate donor loss, 40% of their sales. So one of your major corporate donors, I'm going to make it up, maybe, AT&T. I don't know, they support their foundation, may give you X amount of dollars, and they just lost 40% of their sales. It may not be an organization as big as AT&T. It may be a smaller organization like a debt wizard or a farmers insurance agent or something like that. And they lost 40% of their sales. Does that have an impact on the fact that they were one of your key donors and they gave to you? You kind of got to look at that. Local regulations increase restrictions. I think we might be living in that too. 2 months ago, our region lightened up on our restrictions of how we can move about the city. And then they put more restrictions on us on how we can move about the city, how we can go to restaurants and dining. That may have an impact on you. And then materials and packing supplies are impacted. We're seeing that certain supplies are not even being, if they're coming from certain countries, they're not even being let into the United States. And so, your materials and your packing supplies, or your materials and your office supplies, or your materials and anything that you use to actually run your business or your nonprofit may be impacted by factors outside of your control. So the internal impacts to those, it may be impacting donor contributions. It may have an impact on your primary program. It may have an impact on your inventory and or your supply. Staffing changes. The annual fundraising gala might be in jeopardy. If we can only have events that are no larger than 50 individuals, then the fundraising gala might not be able to take place this year, or it may not be able to take place in the method that it has in previous years. And so then move that forward. What's the financial impact of that? My contributions and my program revenue might be impacted. The net asset change is definitely going to have some kind of sway this year. My program expenses could go up, they could go down, but what does that mean for my program expenses? And then labor costs. Staffing changes taking place, that could mean a lot of different things. So what impact is that going to have on the employees that I work with every day? And so that's the process flow of how we kind of get through these scenarios. But the beginning of this process is just stopping to brainstorm and say, hey, what are the change drivers here? What are the things that are actually happening internally and externally to my nonprofit that I need to at least stop and think about? And if they really don't have an internal impact, great. But if they do, I need to start building that type of information into my financial model, okay? Now I wanna stop and pause because we are going to deep dive a little bit and show you what it looks like, what one scenario, actually I got two scenarios that we're gonna walk through. How does that actually work? But I wanna stop and just highlight some facts and statistics on where nonprofits are as we are starting August 2020. Again, the pandemic hit in March, and so we've got now several months of being exposed to this very volatile environment. And some of our leading universities now have started to do surveys and to engage hundreds of nonprofits to see, hey, how are you guys doing? What's going on? And so you may find yourself in one of these areas that I just list, and I'm really listing them to let you know you're in good company. Sometimes we think we're the only ship that may have a leak and it freaks us out, but you're not. And so if you fall in any of these spaces, you're in good company, and there's a strategy and a plan to shift you from this place to the next. And so our the Stanford review reports came out. Again, Stanford surveyed hundreds of nonprofits as of the beginning of June, actually. And what they found was that 73% of nonprofits have dropped in revenue. 73% have had a decrease and a significant decline in their revenue. The good news on the flip side is that 26% have increased. And you go, wow, they've increased in this period of time. Well, they have. Again, one size doesn't fit all. And so depending on the industry that they've been in, you may be experiencing rising demand for your nonprofit. You may have had a strong government or philanthropic response to your nonprofit. And we're seeing that. And at 26%, that's a significant portion of nonprofits that are having a positive response in the midst of this pandemic. And so the scenarios that we're going to do are not going to all be kind of a negative scenario, but some of them are positive. And some of you may have mixed scenarios as well, where this is going up, but this is going down. And so wherever you kind of find yourself, I want to make sure that you are prepared to shift accordingly. 82% of nonprofits shifted their programming to virtual programming. I mean, that is a huge, huge number. 82% had to make adjustments. That means to their IT and their technology. That means to their staffing. That means they shifted how they touch and reach their clients and that's the community that they serve every single day. Many of them have been doing this for decades, and on a dime, they had to shift to a virtual platform. That's actually amazing. And then I think even more amazing, this particular fact just blows my mind because I've been talking about it for years, is that 23% of nonprofits today verbalize that they are considering mergers and partnerships with other nonprofits that they've never considered before. And for all the executive directors and heads of nonprofits on the line and on the virtual feed today, you have to know the significance of that fact. I mean, 23% are considering mergers and partnerships. That's actually unheard of. When I've had numerous conversations with individuals and kicking around the concept of, there's so many nonprofits out here. I think, I think they should merge, and so should merge with so-and-so and, pool their resources. And that concept has been going on, and that talk has been going on for years. But now we've been placed in a position that if we want to survive, many organizations are kind of being forced to be in that space. And it might actually be the best space. And so those 4 facts alone, I just want you to know that, wow, the face of nonprofits are drastically changing, and it's okay. But what that means is let's set up a plan and a model to change with it and to find our space. Where do we fit? Where does your nonprofit fit in these changes? Okay, so next slide. Now we're going to kind of work this model. We're going to work these drivers. This particular driver is highlighting when there's a negative impact to your organization or to your finances because of a change in the environment. And so the red highlight that we're going to kind of walk forward is saying, hey, what if one of our major corporate donors lost 40% of their sales? Okay, so just get in your mind who are one of your key donors, and they're in trouble. They are having some difficulties paying their bills, right? Unfortunately, they may call you and say, hey, I know I normally do this. No, yes, I normally contribute X to your organization or to this program, but I don't think that's going to happen for 2020 and 2021. I'm going to try to pick it back up. I'll revisit around June 2021 and see if we can pick it back up. Okay, you may get that kind of call. The internal impact to that you have to look at immediately is there a loss of key donor revenue? In this particular case, as I described, I made the liberty of saying that there might be. Is there a loss of funding for a specific program? Obviously, identifying which specific program is going to be impacted by that particular person or that particular donor. And then the loss of funding for staff members. Obviously with any program, there's people attached to it. And so we need to understand, can I have those people still work on different programs, or do I need to furlough that individual, and what is that going to look like? So then that moves forward to a financial impact. It reduces contributions and program revenue from that key donor. It reduces or ceases the programming associated with that donor's funds. And then again, I have to consider reducing the staff members due to that particular loss of funding. That's kind of straightforward scenario, but you could do that exact same scenario with any one of these drivers, specifically with the fact that the school districts canceled in-person school. When I sat down and thought about that, depending on which industry you're in, that actually may be a positive impact to your organization. I used to sit on the board of America Scores, and Brandon knows America Scores, I know very well. But it's an after-school program for poet athletes, and maybe the after-school programming right now is about to skyrocket. You've got more kids at home doing in-person school. And in that particular case, you've got parents that are trying to figure out how to do their jobs and get the kids and their schooling. And so to have just a couple of hours to be able to, after they're done with their virtual learning, to then now you shift to do something virtually and some kind of interactive approach with America Scores. I know people would probably, there's funds out there to pay you to do that right now. And so, and that may be conversations and that you have never been able to get full leverage on before. I know sometimes it's difficult getting in with certain school districts. They may be looking for you now. They may be hunting you down now to actually work with you. And so again, all of these drivers are not necessarily negative drivers, but you want to stop and look at them. And again, with your team of trusted individuals, ask yourself, hey, is this working for me, or how does this work for me? And then this is the positive impact to these drivers. Again, I use the local school districts, but with this could have an increase or created new service areas. It could have an increased visibility in your school districts that you didn't have before. I couldn't get the meeting with the principal before. Now I can get the meeting with the principal, which is great. Internal technology needs to be updated. So you may have to come in and do some IT work to get you ready and built up to actually service students in a new creative way. And then there's financial impact to that. Obviously, we want to do this because it's increasing our program revenue. It's going to create or expand existing programming. The cost of it's going to go up too, right? So there's some kind of IT cost related to that, and that has to be vetted out. And then there's going to be possibly an increase in program staffing. And so you may be able to use the existing staffing that you have to help out with these scenarios, but you also, depending on how big it grows, you might want to shift and to add staffing because you're just killing it right now. So in these particular cases, again, change drivers can be positive, or they can have a negative impact to your financial results. Both of them, you want to be able to build them into the model. I'm going to get into the model real quickly, but again, I'm going to stop and check and make sure, does anyone have any questions? I'm kind of reading through here. And it looks like we are pretty good on time now that I understand our time a little bit better. Okay, if we don't have any more questions at this point, I'm going to pull up for us an example of kind of what I just talked through. Okay. All right, and if I can make this even bigger, I am like winning today. Like if I can make it bigger, I think I won. And so I did win, so that's a good thing. So what you have before you is a spreadsheet. I know the spreadsheet is back, everyone. It scares some people, but please do not let the spreadsheet scare you. We will get through the spreadsheet together, and it's going to be all good. So the spreadsheet, again, has various tabs on here, but this particular template that I have before you is a cash flow projection, and it's projecting on a monthly basis where you believe your cash will be based upon revenues and income. Most of this revenue and income should, in this entire model actually, hopefully exists, that you can pull this easily from a budget that you've already started, that you've been working on, or a statement of activities that you've been working on. And this is something that all this data is already kind of in this format. And then you can just begin to kind of tweak things in and out to shift to the scenarios that we kind of just spoke of. So I'm going to try to take one of these scenarios that we talked about, and I'm going to actually start on where the first one, where it talked about the key donor loss, where we had that one donor that has been such a faithful and phenomenal donor for the last several years, but unfortunately, because of COVID-19, they've had a 40% decrease in their sales. And they just contacted you and said, hey, I know we do this typically, but I don't think I'm going to be able to fund you at all or at that level. And so what does that mean? And how do you plan that out? So this particular template, again, I'm going to talk through, they're all kind of set up the exact same way, but I'm going to talk through how it's set up. It's got on the column A here, all of your cash or your revenue coming in this section, cash received, and then it's got your cash dispersed, separated between your program costs and then your administrative costs. And then it's got what the total cash dispersed is and what your net cash balance, okay? Now, your specific cash flow, this is a template, this is a model for you to kind of look at, but it may be more complicated or less complicated. And I'm using cash as opposed to using kind of a profit and loss statement or profit and loss viewpoint, because I always say cash is king, right? So if you know where your cash is coming in and out, you can also use the P&L approach, but this is an easy, quick way for you to know, do I have enough assets to cover the expenses that I have in any given month at any given time? And you can see with this is for a period of time. This is from June through December. So that again is starting to build our time horizon that we talked about. You want to build this thing out definitely for the remainder of this year, but you want to build it out for all of 2021, the best that you know how, with the best information that you have, and then update this thing as you have new information. So if I acquire a new donor at the end of this year that says, hey, we're gonna step up and start funding you at this amount through June of 2021, add that to you. Now you can easily and quickly add this to the model. And then this is all fed through that it will allow you to quickly see what's your new net bottom line, okay? So in this particular case, what you see on the far left is I've got my beginning cash, your beginning cash, and I'm starting this out in June. So in June, I'm calling this column my original, but this is really, call it pre-COVID, right? So pre-impact of anything. This is just our normal operating month in June. And then after June, this is when we start to see some shifts and we want to plan for these shifts. In this particular case, we have our beginning cash of $24,500, and we've got two donors in this particular scenario, key donor 1, key donor 2. Key donor 1 typically was supporting us at about $10,000 on a monthly basis. Key donor 2, about $15,000. And so we got the phone call, the dreaded phone call, that both of them are reducing their contributions to us. And so in July, that 10,000 went to 5, and that 15 also went to 5, right? So not exactly what we want to see. But in both of these cases, and I'm actually going to send that. I'm going to say maybe donor 2 isn't. So donor 2 didn't drop us to 5. Maybe donor 2 took us to 7,500. So just say half. Okay. So in this scenario, now you can see our revenues dropped substantially, unfortunately, but we went from having $54,000 at the end of June. We dropped to 29. We know now it's dropping to 5 by the end of this month in August. And then beginning in September, we've got a problem, right? We've got a hole that we need to cover. And so right off the bat, doing just that simple adjustment in the model quickly lets you know the time frame that you're going to start to see a negative impact to your resources. This means in this particular model, with knowing that, we so far haven't made any adjustments to our costs. So we've got our program costs and we've got our administrative costs. If I know going into August that if I don't make any changes to costs, I'm gonna drop down to $5,000. Well, that means that's already a driver to let me know I need to cut costs, right? Unfortunately, there's a couple of places that are always where our dollars usually are sitting in for most nonprofits, and most of the dollars are always sitting in salaries. And so right off the bat, those dollars being cut may actually be individuals, their programs. They're individuals that were working on X programs. And so you may be able to easily identify who those dollars are associated with within your salaries, but you may not. And so it may have been general operating revenue that was cut, but it's still having a substantial impact on your organization. This is the place where, again, you want to gather your team and say, hey, we have got to look at these financials. We've got to cut by at least, in this case, probably $30,000 to be able to make it through August, September, October. And then we need to, and that'll just float us the next 3 months. And then we need to determine what are we going to do for November, December. But adjusting within a model such as this will allow you to have a clear visibility to where the dollars stand and where they will stand in certain scenarios. So that's our key donor loss scenario. But what if it's not a loss scenario? What if it's like the second example that we gave, where you now have an after school program that is like moving like gangbusters. So you guys have a lot of increased need and increased programming for your after school program because all the kids are at home and they now need additional things to do, and there's funding to help you to do that. So if that's the type of scenario where you're actually expanding, so now in this scenario, again, June is our starter scenario. And with June being our starter scenario, we are moving and shifting from June to July, where now things are starting to shift a little bit for us. And actually in this case, one shift that took place, and this is kind of a mixed scenario, Grant 1, they called us and said, hey, we can't do $10,000 a month, we can do 5. So we had to drop that for the remainder of the year. But in column D, beginning in August, we just found out, hey, that the schools want us to pick up after school programming beginning in August through the remaining of the year. So now we went from program 2 being at $5,000 a month to $12,000 a month, which is phenomenal. And so now you've kind of got, this is a mixed scenario where you've got some things going up, some things going down, but you want to build all of these into your model. And then you can see clearly that you've got total cash available in June of $59,500. It never quite got back up to $59,000 because you did have some decreases, but you substantially plugged that hole by program 2 increasing, and you can see the impact of that $12,000 a month for the remaining of the year. And then once again, you want to increase or determine whether or not that means, do my cost increase associated with that? In this case, I said yes. I made the assumption to say yes in August because I think we're going to do so great. And I increased our salaries a little bit to help with that after school programming that I think is going to do so well. So in this case, this is, again, a combination of us taking the change drivers that we talked about in that other slide and build them forth into what's the internal impact to the organization, and then have that internal impact show up in our financial model, show up here in your cash flow projection, show up here in your analysis to determine what are those dollars going to look like and flow through. And the good thing about this particular type of model is it's yours, right? You can save a new one of these every hour on the hour if you want to, and just play around with it. As new data approaches, again, as we get new information in our unpredictable society that we're living in right now, these are the areas that you want to roll that new information and those drivers in here. Okay. I feel like I'm talking again, so I'm gonna stop again and just do a quick check-in with everyone. See how everyone's doing. Okay, Brandon says I'm okay. So I think I've got 15 minutes is what he has just told me. And I think they gave me a little bit more time, so I'll take it. So I've got a little bit more time, and with our last 15 minutes, which is good timing, I'm gonna close that out. I'm gonna pull the slide deck back up, but before we kind of shift thought a little bit, I see I don't have questions. I always don't know how to treat not having questions, to be honest. I'm like, do they get it? Do they not get it? What does that mean? They don't have questions. But the main thing that I want you to receive from the entire thing that we just went through with the modeling and the scenarios and all of that, and I think we're going to make sure that these slides are available as well for individuals if you want to go back through. Take this information, take how things are structured and set up, and literally use that as a way of determining how all these shifts in our society impact your nonprofit. And then that's how you fold it into your cash forecast. And then surviving the economic downturn is strongly built upon your ability to plan and get ahead of it. And so what we have just talked about is a process. How do I plan for unpredictability? You know, it's like, how do you plan for the unknown? Well, that's how you plan for the unknown. You build up stories, you build up what could happen. So you build up cases around things that you do know, and then you can build up scenarios on things that you don't even know if it's going to happen or not, but the what if, right? So you could do the best case, worst case scenario. You can do those different type of scenarios so many different ways that just make sense for you, make sense for your industry, make sense for your clients that you serve. And then I would also, we're talking about it kind of on the getting through it or the responding viewpoint. But then I think I want us to make sure that we talk about those scenarios from the thriving standpoint. Those don't just have to be how do I keep the lights on kind of conversation, and we clearly might be in that right now. But I want to make sure that you understand that you can use that same process and those processes to take you to a place of, now let me dream. You know, what if I'm able to really do that idea that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to create new programming within the school districts. Now is my opportunity to do it. What if I can set something up? I might not be able to make it happen by 2020, but what if I can really work hard, and this is the right moment to set this thing up for 2021, where before I had a little difficulty getting in. Now I have access to get in. Let's build that. So let's build a model just for that. Let's build a model just to go through a new program that you've always wanted to do, and the concepts around it, and how will that impact, what staffing do you need? I mean, literally build it all the way through and put it into your financial model as a projection for 2021. And so at that point, you can see that these scenarios they're useful for all different time frames, all time zones. They're useful for various reasons. And organizations, what I just showed you, I promise you, organizations big and small use the same methodology to come to solutions. They use the same methodology to determine whether or not they have the right capital to start a new venture. They use the same methodology to determine whether or not they should and can build out a new wing in the hospital next year? Do I have the resources to build that wing out? Do I have community buy-in? You know, they start with those drivers. Do I have, are the ingredients right? Is the atmosphere right within the drivers, within the community space, within the hospital and healthcare space? Are the drivers right for me to be able to move forward into this space? And if it is, they start to build the impact of that internally, and they then build out the financial models to support that same concept and ideas. So I just want to clarify, because I don't see the questions, but so that everyone fully understands that that's how you use them, and that's how expansive they can be if you want to use them that way. Okay? So, changing a quick thought, and I'm going to pull up our slides again. And our last concept that I want to share with you are just some best practices, right? Some best practices in terms of not just the time that we live in right now, but it is the time that we live in. So some of these are specifically kind of skewed to the fact that we're in a pandemic, and some of them are just kind of best practices. This is what we should be doing for the viability of our organization. The first one, and this is because we just went through those scenarios on pulling out the drivers and then walking those drivers forward. Well, you can only pull out the drivers when you're abreast of what's happening. And so you gotta stay abreast on what state and local governments are issuing in terms of emergency or shelter in place orders, curfews. I know protests have been in months past and weeks past really kind of a major impact in our city. It may have shut down access to your street, where clients were able to walk down your street before and come and get their services, or come and meet with someone. If the street is shut down, they can't even get to you. And so you have to be able to understand what's happening in your immediate area, as well as, I would say, I need to know what's happening locally. I need to know what's happening in the city and in the state and then in the nation. If we don't make it to international, which I always say we need to know that as well, but we definitely need to know what's happening in our region. And then build those, if something significant is happening, build that into your drivers. Establish processes for partial or complete shutdown so that you don't get disrupted with cash receipts, cash disbursements, or payroll. What that means is, again, those drivers, we don't know what's going to happen. And so if something changes on the dime, you need to be able to still operate and do business. And so moving to online platforms with accounting platforms, online payroll platforms, online banking, all of that is absolutely crucial in the market and the environment that we live in. That is going to help you to survive. And so all the modeling in the world is great, but it's not great if you can't actually execute any of these transactions. If you can't execute payroll, if you can't, you got all the cash, but you can't execute payroll, or you can't execute a banking transaction because you don't have online banking, then it's not so great. And so right now, there are a lot of affordable online platforms. Obviously, banks and things like that offer a lot of those platforms at minimal cost, sometimes zero cost. But again, look into TechSoup and other organizations that right now are supporting nonprofits like never before, and making sure that they have access to software and hardware to make their lives easier. Be prepared to make tough decisions right now. If you have to reduce headcount, I would consider using a furlough option as opposed to termination off the bat. I believe especially if you have an employee or employees that are your best performing employees and you really don't want to lose them, try to furlough them before you terminate them, because you don't want them to be caught up and snatched up by someone else. And I can tell you guys and share with you guys that the expectation for the labor market is that it's going to kick up by the end of this year. And so if you furlough certain individuals, that means they're still kind of they're still technically an employee. If you terminate them, they can get picked up by anybody, but people might stay around with you if you choose to furlough them and keep them as an employee. It's just going to be a little better option to try to retain them if you still want to work with them. And then I had this on here to get in line for the PPP loan. I'm going to keep it on here. Obviously, we know that there's currently legislation in process for some stimulus package, and we don't know if that stimulus package comes with additional funding right now for the PPP area, or how it's going to actually play out. But if you have not applied for the PPP loan and you can, I would highly suggest that you, it says get in line. So I would try to get the money. If the monies are available for you, don't let money just sit on the table and you lose that opportunity. So lean in. I would get with a accounting professional and have someone actually, or a banker as well, and have them kind of walk you through the process of how to apply for these loans. Right now, communication is critical. And if you are a nonprofit that is experiencing significant changes in your cash flow, your ability to make certain payments is being challenged on a frequent basis, the first thing that I would suggest that you do is to actually contact critical vendors and suppliers. Help them understand that you're having issues right now. Help them understand that you are having some difficulties making those payments, and to have those conversations on the beforehand. So I say, tell them in advance so they're not surprised when they get a late payment or get a short payment. And sometimes, even if you have to short pay, I would say short pay. But the main thing to do at this juncture is communicate. And you will probably find that individuals are willing to work with you or willing to set up arrangements with you. Specifically, landlords, bankers, contact your legislators as well. I've talked to several nonprofits, particularly smaller ones. You never know when you may need a friend, right? And so right now is actually, to be honest, I don't suggest making a friend now to use a friend now, right? Unfortunately, if you haven't known your legislator this whole time, meeting them and greeting them and then asking for a favor all at the same time won't look so great for you. But if you have known your legislators and you need some help, I would reach out to them and see what they can do and tell them what's going on with you, because they do want to keep your nonprofit in their region and they want to keep you in existence and servicing the community. So that's a major thing. If you don't know them, please use this time to just pick up and start getting to know your legislators. I wouldn't ask for favors right now, but you may need these favors next year. So start building these relationships because they're going to be crucial. The last thing that I wanted to say, and I think I have just a few minutes here, is I've talked previously about insurance policies and understanding your coverage. And every single time I talk about it, I have more information on kind of where we stand. And so I still want to point out to individuals, pull out those insurance policies and understand what coverage, if any, you have against business interruption insurance. What's your exposure if an employee gets COVID-19 while working on the job? That means look at those workers' compensation insurance, pull out that general liability policy, look at your board of directors coverage right now, your umbrella coverage. You need to understand what coverage you have to mitigate any potential risks that your organization may face, again, in this uncertain time. And all of these things combined that we talked about, I know we talked about a little bit of a lot, but these things will actually help you and secure your positioning in being able to survive this economic downturn. You just doing the modeling asking the hard questions, talking to people, getting answers, planning and preparing will definitely position you to be a lot better off than most organizations and nonprofits that don't know exactly where they stand at all. Okay. So with that being said, I am going to stop here. And I don't see any questions. And I
do have I do have a couple comments I want to add, Kim, if I could.
Yep.
I should be on video now. So first of all, I want to thank you for doing this again. This was great. I want to offer a little recap to everybody and then offer some additional, perspective on some of the things that you shared. So just as a form of recap, what Kim has really talked to us about is regularly understanding that something unanticipated can happen and planning for the unanticipated. And in that way, even though we'll be surprised when that thing manifests, we understand that nothing ever stays the same forever and that we should be prepared for other moments. So even though we didn't get a chance to talk about things like cash reserves, those are things that you should be thinking about, right? I think the last time we were together in June, I mentioned that maybe like a year and a half ago, I went to a local bank and negotiated what's essentially a high interest rate on what we ended up calling an operational savings account for a nonprofit that allows them to get a minimum of 1%, sometimes as high as 1.9% on the savings account, with no punitive actions for withdrawals or number of withdrawals, no minimum balance. But effectively for that organization, they parked enough money there that it was like earning 50% of one of their major fundraisers every year without doing any work, without laying out any cash for marketing. Those are the types of things that we need to be thinking about. She also covered cash projections. I will take her slide deck and her spreadsheet. They'll be on the website immediately this afternoon. This recording will end up on our YouTube channel and the Deaconess Foundation YouTube channel within the next couple of days. Additionally, she asked us to look at using those cash projections to create scenarios so we can start to make tough decisions, whether that be furlough or whether we focus on specific programs rather than others. And she mentioned early on the importance of innovation. And I like how you expressed it, Kim, which is that I'm confident you're all out there innovating. And if you haven't, you should. We talked about this in June call as well, which is that you need to get ahead, as much of ahead as you can at this moment. I've been spending a lot of time over the last couple of weeks talking to people about the importance of figuring out how much of your programming can happen virtually. And by doing that, you create some opportunities to get new fundings and shore up places where donors may have made changes to what they can allocate to you, okay? You may even see some of those donors come back because you've answered one of the problems that they have, which is how do we invest in institutions and know there'll actually be effective programming on the back end of that. All of this, seeing crisis as an opportunity, right? Obstacles, challenges, or opportunities for us to show that we're high functioning, that we have the capacity to solve problems, okay? I really see you guys in a lot of ways as just another branch of first responder. Firefighters, police officers, nurses, doctors, they do something that's easy and tangible, but here's the reality. You're serving the most vulnerable people every day when most people don't realize there's an emergency going on. So you've got to find a way to get your finances in place so you can continue to do that. In addition, you talked about the concept of negotiating costs. I've negotiated costs with QuickBooks before, right? So don't think that your biggest vendors aren't willing to make adjustments for you, and make your insurance broker work for you. If you don't know how to read those policies, you've got to talk to your insurance broker and make them help you understand. That is their job. That's what they get paid to do. Not to just write policies, but make sure you understand your policy. What else? Kim also brought up the concept of creating some relationships, in particular with elected officials. And I would say here's another opportunity where you may not want to go to an elected official and ask them for money because you don't have an existing relationship, but you do have an opportunity to prove that you do know how to pivot, right? If you find some solutions, if you're running a virtual summer academy and you're moving into after-school programming, or you found a way to do therapeutic treatment for survivors of domestic violence, you need to be making sure that you're talking to elected officials and key stakeholders in the community so they understand that you've got answers to problems that people are talking to them about, right? They're making decisions and they need to know that you have those answers, which is what Black Funders is all about, which is reinforcing that Black-led nonprofits have something to contribute, right? So it's really, really important that we let all of this information sink in. Like I said, all of it will be on the website later on. All the material that you saw today, the recording will be on the website and hopefully by the end of the week. And I do want to mention what comes next, and then I'll let you get back if you have any closing statements, Kim. Our next session, I believe, yes, is board development with Marissa Payne. It's next Tuesday, August the 11th. And before I let Kim do any closing remarks, I want to remind everybody, I know that today is the Missouri primary. Go out and vote. Man, it's never been more important. Kim, any last parting words?
No, I was just going to say, thank you, Brandon. I think you always do such a great recap. I think we should do these in tandem just because they make sense. It's like,
yes, I agree.
It just always makes, but you know, we've talked. It's like, it makes
Yes.
sense to do them together, but thank you for having me back and for your comments as well. I was going to say the same thing, vote, vote, vote. And that's my closing statement and I'm sticking to it.
All right. So I appreciate everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday, session 3 of 6, and stay tuned. Take care.